Did you know that America has had its first mass flirtation with fascism? It was loud, it was Catholic, and it marched proudly through the streets of New York. They called themselves the Christian Front. Inspired by the radio priest Charles Coughlin, this movement was no fringe oddity bubbling on the sidelines of American life. It had pulpits filled with fire, priests who thundered his words as gospel, and bishops who nodded along in approval. It reached deep into institutions people trusted, churches, unions, even law enforcement, some attending rallies in uniform, giving the movement the look of official sanction. Hundreds of New York City cops openly supported it, even members of the National Guard, even ties to Nazi Germany. It was a nationwide network with spiritual authority, muscle on the streets, and a blueprint for reshaping America. And for a brief, terrifying moment, they dreamed of taking over the United States government. In the late 30s, the Great Depression had battered working families, leaving deep scars of poverty and resentment. President Roosevelt's New Deal was reshaping the country, but not without fierce resistance from those who saw it as creeping socialism. Overseas, the world was spiraling toward catastrophe. Hitler had just unleashed Kristallnacht in Germany, Japan was pushing deeper into China, and the clouds of another world war were gathering. Americans were anxious, fearful and divided. Some called for more democracy, others whispered that democracy itself had failed. Breadlines stretched for blocks and trust in banks had collapsed. And into this chaos stepped in one of the most popular voices in the history of America, Father Charles Coughlin, a Catholic priest from Michigan, known simply as the radio priest. At his peak, he reached 30 million listeners, more than Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats. But his message wasn't hope, it was rage. Coughlin railed against Jews, calling them bankers, Bolsheviks, and destroyers of civilization. He founded a newspaper called Social Justice and demanded a crusade against what he called the anti-Christian forces of the Red Revolution, and people listened. In November 1938, following Coughlin's call, thousands of Catholics, mostly Irish and German Americans in New York, formed a new movement. They called it the Christian Front. Its leader, John F. Cassidy, a St. John's Law School graduate who had failed the bar exam 3 times. Handpicked by Coughlin himself, Cassidy was introduced to the world as the Little Führer. The Christian Front quickly grew to several thousand members. They sold Coughlin's newspaper, boycotted Jewish businesses, and filled the streets with rallies and parades. And they weren't alone. The Christian Front had powerful allies, not just in the streets, but in the church hierarchy. One of the most vocal defenders was Bishop Thomas Malloy of Brooklyn, a highly influential Catholic figure at the time. Rather than condemn the group's growing extremism or its anti-Semitic rhetoric, Bishop Malloy stood by them publicly, lending institutional cover to a movement flirting openly with fascism. His diocesan newspaper, The Tablet, went even further, responding to accusations of antisemitism with cold, dismissive indifference. When confronted with the group's inflammatory speeches and violent threats, The Tablet asked, well, what of it? Just what law was violated? This wasn't just silence from the pulpit, it was endorsement, and it revealed how, in the climate of the 1930s and early 40s, hatred could be rationalized and minimized. The Christian Front made no distinction between communists and Jews. To them, they were one and the same. At rallies, they mocked President Roosevelt as Rosenfeld, praised Franco in Spain, and even praised Hitler. They worked with the German-American Bund, paraded through New York, and welcomed like-minded groups like the Crusaders for Americanism. And this wasn't just fringe thuggery. Hundreds of New York police officers, as many as 400, were Christian Front members. So were men in the National Guard. Street violence soon followed. Jews were harassed, beaten and stabbed in broad daylight. Coughlin himself had urged his followers to emulate Franco's violence in Spain. And they listened. By 1939, the Christian Front had grown bolder. FBI infiltrators uncovered their plans to throw bombs into Jewish theaters, newspapers and labor offices, and then blame the chaos on communists. The ultimate goal? to provoke riots, claim self-defense, and wage open war against Jews and leftists in America. The group began amassing an alarming arsenal, stockpiling rifles, pistols, Browning automatic rifles, and even improvised explosive devices. Some of the firearms were said to have been brazenly stolen directly from National Guard armories, a move that signalled both their boldness and their growing sense of impunity. This was the groundwork for an armed campaign, a deliberate, methodical build-up of firepower meant for something far more sinister than self-defence. The Christian Front had a plot that was so brazen and so outrageous that it sounds like fiction. The plan: storm Washington, D.C., surround the White House with armed men, arrest the president's inner circle, and then install a military dictator. The chosen strongman, retired General George Van Horn Moseley, an outspoken anti-Semite and fascist sympathizer who once claimed that Jewish people were trying to enslave America. The Christian Front wanted him at the helm of a new government, a Catholic theocracy draped in the flag and backed by the barrel of a gun. This was a planned coup d'etat, right here in the United States, not by foreign powers, but by American citizens, wrapped in the cross, waving the flag and calling themselves patriots. The government finally cracked down. In January 1940, 17 men were arrested in Brooklyn and charged with seditious conspiracy. At the trial, tensions boiled over. Crowds shouted support for the defendants. Fistfights broke out outside the courthouse, and in a bizarre twist, the jury foreman was married to the lead defense attorney. The trial dragged on for 10 weeks. In the end, most defendants were acquitted and some cases ended in hung juries. But the damage was done. Public opinion had turned. The Christian Front was exposed as a gang of violent cranks, and their credibility collapsed. One historian later said, "The trial revealed the Christian Fronters to be a group of unbalanced cranks and successfully discredited the entire movement." Though the New York branch collapsed, other front groups lingered. In Boston, leader Francis Moran even worked as a German agent. His office was finally shut down in 1942, but the front continued underground until 1945. As America entered World War II, open sympathy for fascism became toxic. Father Coughlin himself was muzzled, his magazine Social Justice shut down under government orders. The Christian Front faded into obscurity. But their existence is a chilling reminder. Fascism wasn't just over there in Europe, it was right here, in Brooklyn, in Boston, in the pews of Catholic churches, and in the ranks of America's police. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. The Christian Front's story proves that America is not immune to fascism. All it takes is a cause, and people willing to do whatever it takes to see their side win. Whenever times get tough, when people lose faith in their institutions, there's always someone ready to whisper hate into a microphone, and a crowd ready to cheer it. The Christian Front is forgotten today, but it shouldn't be. Because the question isn't whether America has flirted with fascism before. It is, how close are we to doing it all over again? And when it returns, will we even know it's here? What do you think? Could something like the Christian Front rise again in America?